The thing about stress is we need it in reasonable quantities. When we have too little stress, especially in our work life, well, we become bored, we lose interest and have no motivation. We've all probably experienced a good level of stress that happens when you might need to hit a deadline or perhaps prepare for a presentation. The stress that occurs here actually helps us to get things done. But it's when we experience too much stress from too many directions for too long that we really begin to suffer. Imagine stress being similar to doing a workout in the gym. You would apply a bit of stress on the body in the form of exercise, which would then be followed by a period of rest. This enables you to work at a consistent level, whereas if we try to exercise all day, every day at a high rate, it'll probably lead to burnout. So there's a sort of balancing act that happens where we need to find a middle ground or a sweet spot between doing too much and doing too little. This is what psychologists Robert Yerkes and John Dodson called optimal performance. It's where our performance increases with the amount of stress that we experience, but only to a certain point, and then we start to see a drop-off. Now, the levels of stress that we can all manage are going to be different for every person, so we can't really tell you when you're doing too much, but your body and your behaviours most probably will. Which is why it's important to understand your own individual stress signs, because being aware early on of what happens to your body during times of stress means you can do something about it before you experience too much. Well, there are typically 4 main areas that will show some sort of sign that things are getting a little too much for us, and they are the psychological signs, the emotional signs, the physical signs, and the behavioural signs, and these aren't always immediately noticeable to us. And we tend to think that in order for someone to be stressed, they have to be holding their head in their hands and pulling their hair out, or screaming at somebody in the car. But that's not always the case, because there are a lot more subtle ones that we can look out for a lot earlier. At the end of this video, you'll have the chance to work through the material where you can see the full list of signs and write down which ones you notice you do. But for now, let's go through some examples of the different signs you might exhibit. Now, the psychological signs could be things like memory lapses or even the inability to make really simple decisions. And then there's things of the emotional signs, which are things like mood swings or becoming irritable over really small things and being extra sensitive. And some of the physical signs could be grinding your teeth, or even the constant aches and pains around the body, or perhaps developing frequent colds. And then finally, some of the behavioural signs could be things like absenteeism, or even things like self-neglect. So as you can see, they aren't always noticeable, which is why it's important to understand this, and by working through the download sheet, you can start becoming a little bit more self-aware, so that in the future, you know early on that something needs to change, and it's also where you can put in some strategies to help.